we've been fighting for the legislative framework, setting the foundation. We're not saying that all of Pharmacare should be in the next budget. That's not what we asked for. We've been very clear. In fact, it's written clearly in what we fought for and what we negotiated. So they know that. They also know, and we know, why they have been dragging their feet. They've been dragging their feet. They've been stringing Canadians along for 3 decades. Let's not forget, the Liberals promised Pharmacare in 1997. For decades, they've been breaking this promise. The Liberals, under Justin Trudeau, promised Pharmacare themselves in their own campaigns, yet continue to break this promise. And they say the same thing again and again. Jurisdiction, it's going to be hard to work with provinces. It's going to cost too much. These are excuses that they've been giving for 3 decades. We're saying enough's enough. It's in what we fought for. We have given the Prime Minister a deadline, a very firm deadline. He's got to deliver this by the 1st of March. He's got to stop trying to appease big pharma and big insurance companies and put in place the legal framework that's good for that young boy, that's good for those seniors that I've met, to make sure we move forward with a universal coverage for all Canadians. So this is no longer a worry. We are fighting for that first big step forward. That's what we're fighting for. That's what the Liberals are well aware. And I've said to them, I've said to Justin Trudeau directly, if they do not follow through on this, if they break their promise yet again to Canadians, there will be consequences. I also want to take a moment to reflect on what's happened recently in Manitoba. And I just can't even imagine. I can't even think of the words to describe what's going on. But let us be clear what happened. This is gender-based violence. This was a man who killed his own children and his partner. We are faced with an epidemic of violence against women in our country. Many groups have been saying we need to call this an emergency, call it for what it is. My heart breaks for everyone impacted. My solidarity and thoughts to the family and to the friends directly impacted. But what we need to do now in the face of this horrible gender-based violence is commit to ending that violence. Je veux vous rappeler.
I would like to say, I would like to remind you
who
we are fighting for when we're talking about Pharmacare. We're fighting for our seniors who need to choose between groceries or medication. We're fighting to build a Pharmacare program that works for people, for workers, families, and seniors. And for a long time, we were clear with the Liberals. It's been clear. They're looking to please big pharma and big insurance companies, and we do not agree with that. So we gave them a deadline of March 1st. By that time, we want a bill to build the foundation for a Pharmacare program. The Liberals are saying it's too expensive, it's too hard to work for the provinces. And that's the same excuse they've used for decades because they've been promising the Pharmacare program for 30 years. So we're saying that's enough with the excuses. We need a bill now. This is what we have forced the Liberals to accept. And now, I said to Justin Trudeau, you have until March 1st to deliver this bill. Otherwise, there will be consequences. And I was firm on that. Finally, I want to take a moment to share my condolences to everyone who has been impacted by what happened in Manitoba. It's truly horrific, and I really don't have the words to express how horrific. But it was gender-based violence. It was a man who killed his partner and his family. We need to acknowledge that this is a problem across the country. We're seeing an explosion of violence against women and gender-based violence, and we need to respond to this crisis.
With that, I'm ready for any questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Singh, can you please clarify if the NDP expect in the bill there to be a system for single-payer Pharmacare?
Yes, what we have said very clearly, our expectation is, well, frankly, it's the expectation, not just my expectation, not just New Democrats, all experts, and in fact, the Liberal government's own commission report confirms the best way forward that's going to save everyone money, it's going to save families money, the kid that I talked about, seniors that are worried, provinces, the federal government, the best way forward that's going to save everyone money is a single-payer universal program.
And can you clarify if you believe that the negotiations are progressing and a deal will be in place by March 1st with the bill? Or is your sense right now that it won't happen?
My sense right now is I don't know which way it's going. And that's why I made it very clear to the Prime Minister that that's what we expect. And after that meeting, I said that it was a difficult meeting because I did not get clear assurances that this would be resolved. And that's why I'm saying very clearly to Justin Trudeau and to the Liberals, you can't keep on stringing Canadians along. You can't keep on breaking your promise. We expect legislation that lays out that foundation, and it's got to be universal and single payer. We're not saying the money's got to be in the budget. That's never been our ask, and we've never said that. So the Liberals try to spin folks and say that's what we're asking for. It's not the case. But we do expect legislation that lays the foundation, and that's what we're asking for. The Liberals know that. Justin Trudeau knows that. And we'll see what happens on March 1st.
Are you then ready for an election?
Est-ce que la conséquence, c'est que vous déchirez l'entente au 1er mars à minuit? Est-ce que quand vous parlez de conséquence, c'est quoi exactement?
S'il brise l'entente, donc l'entente est brisée, donc oui. Donc s'il brise l'entente, l'entente n'existe pas.
So if the agreement doesn't work, then the elements of the agreement will not continue to exist. There's no guarantee that we would continue to support legislation or passing bills. If the agreement is broken, it's broken. So all consequences are on the table if they break that agreement.
How do you said last week that just because the deal is broken doesn't mean you're going to let the government follow. You might still support them. So then you would be in the position of getting even less from the government. Because the deal's broken, you're not getting Pharmacare, but then even though you're not getting Pharmacare, you're still supporting the government. I just don't understand how that works. How does this not lead to an election if you don't have a deal by March 1st?
There's lots of alternatives, and I'm not going to get into the details here, but I can tell you, generally speaking, there's lots of things that the Liberals look to us based on what we've negotiated. And those things will no longer be on the table. We will no longer support passage of bills. We will no longer speed up the passage of bills. We're not like the Conservatives and preemptively going to determine how we're voting on a budget that we've not seen. So we're not going to say that today. We'll look at the budget. We'll make an assessment if it's something we'll support or not. But what happens if they break the agreement? Then there is no agreement in place. Then we are not entitled. We are not in any way required to continue to provide any support if they break their side of the agreement.
But does it not undermine your ability to threaten this government by saying, hey, we're not really going to threaten you to call an election or to go for an election?
Everything's on the table. If the agreement's not in place, we're saying that none of our votes should be taken for granted. The agreement will be broken. If they break the agreement, they walk away from the agreement, there is nothing that they can expect from us then. We will negotiate. We'll negotiate every vote at a time. We're not like the Conservatives to presuppose and say we're going to vote against everything. We will make our determination based on each vote that comes before us. But with the agreement, we had in place a certain understanding that there would be votes would go a certain way. That will no longer happen.
Le gain que vous avez fait sur la loi anti-briseur de grève en déchirant l'entente?
C'est les libéraux qui vont déchirer l'entente. C'est clair. S'ils brisent leurs promesses, c'est les libéraux qui brisent leur entente. Et il y a du travail qui reste. On va continuer de faire notre travail, de forcer le gouvernement de faire ce qu'il faut, comme on a fait dans le passé. Le anti-briseur de grève, c'est un exemple d'une loi qu'on a forcé le gouvernement de déposer.
Is an example of legislation that we forced the government to pass, and will continue to put pressure. Question? Right now in the polls, Mr. Poilievre and the Conservatives are fully ahead. It says that there's a high chance that there would be a majority Conservative government. Does that change the perspective? How would you feel as the NDP leader of forcing an election that might bring the Conservatives in? Answer? I put the question to the Liberals because they're the ones who would break the promise, who would break the deal if they break their promise. So it's the fault of the Liberal government. They cannot take our support for granted if they break their promise. They cannot take our support for voting in a certain way if they break what they promised to do. So, as we say, the ball is truly in their court. If they break their promise, there will be consequences. Question, you're selling that to your supporters, and so if you don't get one thing, you'll probably cause an election. Answer, it's the fault of the Liberals if they break their promise. I can't understand how it's our fault if the Liberals break their promise.
You were saying single-payer universal. Mark Holland this weekend on CTV said he's not ideologically wedded to that idea. Does it have to be that March 1st?
Yes. Single payer, universal.
As a follow-up, the amount of money that it would cost for what you are advocating is $40 billion a year. Yes, there would be some savings for taxpayers. However, from a fiscal perspective, that is the cost that Mark Holland said was clear and something that there is no fiscal room for. So where does that leave you in your party?
We have never, ever said that we expect that money in the budget. The Liberals know this very well. This is absolute Liberal spin. They know what we're asking for is a legal framework. It is written clearly in what we've negotiated and what we fought for. We want the legal framework to move forward. That's going to require, once we have the legal framework, we also said we know that's also going to require additional steps. We also need a formulary. We also need a bulk purchasing plan. That's all in what we've negotiated, what we fought for. They know this. They know this very well. This is not about spending that money in the budget. It's never been asked for, nor is it written anywhere. They know this. This is clearly spin. It's clearly spin. What we said to them is we want to put in place legislation that sets a framework. And now that framework, there's lots of ways they can stipulate that it's going to require additional work. It's not something that's going to happen next year. There's lots of ways to clarify for credit rating agencies that this is something that's going to require additional work. It's going to require additional steps to happen. There's lots of ways to address those concerns. The Liberals are spinning, and frankly, it doesn't make any sense. We're saying the legal framework has to be there. They know that. We've never asked for the entire budget to be in place. They know that as well. So again, this is the Liberals, again, doing what they've done for 30 years to Canadians. They've been saying, oh yes, we're going to bring in Pharmacare for 30 years. They've been promising this literally for 30 years. Justin Trudeau ran on this not too long ago, 2019. It was in their platform. We're going to bring in Pharmacare. Now what? We're actually having an agreement where we've written it in place and say, okay, cool, do it now. So they could run on it, promise it to Canadians. No big deal, broke their promise. Now we're saying it's in our agreement. We have forced you to now move forward with your own promise, frankly, which they've broken for 30 years. We're saying now do it. So now it becomes this big complex thing, oh, now we can't do it. Well, how does that make any sense? You have promised it for 30 years. We're saying now do it. Lay the foundation of it.
Client confidence deal with the Liberals. Has the political calculus and the benefits to the NDP changed due to the Liberals' sort of slumping poll numbers and new reality politically for the government?
This is never really, if you look at the work that we've done, this has not been about me or been us as New Democrats. We have said what New Democrats have always done. If you look at our history, when we have an opportunity to use our power, look at every New Democrat leader who's had the opportunity to use their power. What have they done with that power? Every time we've had power, we have used it for people. We've used it to find a way to give people a break. We've used it to find a way to lift up the people around us. We've used it to bring in things like universal health care. We used it to bring in things like EI, to bring in things like old age security. We've always used our power to help people. So that's what we're doing now. This is about people. This is about that kid who told me he's worried about how much his medication costs his parents. I want to make sure that kid knows I heard him out and I'm fighting for him to make sure that we can at least move in that direction. Take a step forward for the country towards achieving universal Pharmacare. Make sure that kid knows that, yeah, I heard you and I'm fighting for you.
How do you explain though? How do you explain to NDP supporters and members who last year demanded this Pharmacare system as part of the deal? How do you explain to them that you would be willing to break the deal if you don't get it, but still support the government? In which case, the government would just be getting your support free instead of getting something. How does this not lead to an election?
we have said very clearly that there's lots of ways that there can be consequences. The Liberals, based on what we fought for, require, or have asked for. You gotta at some point. I'll answer your questions. I'm happy to answer questions. You gotta let me answer them at the same time. Like I'm not. Just a reminder. I'm not Pierre Poilievre. Pierre Poilievre would not let you have any follow-ups. Would not let you ask any questions like this. I'm down to answer your questions, but I ask you, if you do ask me a question, I'm going to respond to it respectfully. I appreciate that. If you want to push back, please push back. I appreciate that. I'm not afraid of that. But I do ask you, if I'm speaking, let me respond, because I'm not Pierre Poilievre. I will take the time to hear your questions and respond to them because I have the courage to do so. But then please listen to my responses.